Are you a millennial? Did you, much like me, grow up watching the 1994 flop of a film starring Macaulay Culkin as 10-year-old Richard Tyler, the great Christopher Lloyd as the voice of the titular Pagemaster, but then also mixed in the voices of Patrick Stewart, Whoopi Goldberg, Frank Welker, Leonard Nimoy, as well as the inevitable and the wonderful man who is in everything, Jim Cummings, our favorite Pooh Bear? What I'm asking is, were you also a fan of the Pagemaster just like I was? Hi, I'm Annakuma. When I was growing up, me and my sisters loved the Pagemaster. It was very difficult to find a film that the three of us would all sit down to watch together, as all three of us were very different people, but Pagemaster was one that we all loved greatly. You don't necessarily hear many people talking about Pagemaster these days in 2026. Often if I mention it, I have to explain what the film was to just about anyone I talk to, because no one seems to have ever seen it, which is wild when you see the cast, as I've already told you. You don't need to see them. They were at the beginning of the video, like 2 seconds ago. As a film, it saw live-action Richard turn into a cartoon and go on a journey with the 3 books: Adventure, voiced by Stewart, Fantasy, voiced by Goldberg, and then finally Horror, voiced by Welker. Richard has to make his way through different parts of the library, wandering through various stories to find a strength inside of him that he never knew he had. It was meant to teach kids that there was a lot that you could get out of going to the library to read books. Books take you on crazy adventures, they teach you moral lessons, but most importantly, they are just important parts of our culture. It is the way that our history gets passed down. Sadly, the film did not do well. Trying to tell kids that they'd really love to read books by making a film no one wanted to see just didn't work. Like, they're watching the film. And to be honest, they're not watching the film. But if they were watching the film, they wouldn't then read a book. As a kid, I was the nerdy kid like Richard. But unlike Richard, I already loved reading. Any adventure I could go on, I would take. Reading was my life, but whilst the film didn't inspire a generation even to watch the film nor remember it, I personally never forgot the film. When it released in 1994, 2 games actually released with it. I actually owned the Mega Drive version of the game, which was a platformer, but I only recently found out that another game, a point-and-click FMV game, came out on PC. Honestly, even Wikipedia has the tiniest of blurbs about the game, even existing on the film's entry. It doesn't even get its own entry. It doesn't even get mentioned on the other game's page. The other game has a page. So imagine my excitement to show you this game.
So much for the saying, his bark is worse than his bite.
Yeah, sure, excited. Let's go. Okay, I'm half joking. We're thrown into the intro with the books coming to find Richard, as this is technically a sequel to the film in some ways. Enjoy the intro as much as it works as an intro.
It didn't open. We better go back.
I can do this. It just needs a little more oomph.
Here, use this baseball bat.
That's me peg leg, you cannonball. Now stand aside. I'll get us out of here.
That won't be necessary.
Look, sparkly dust. It's so pretty.
I'd have had us in shipshape long ago.
More like shipwrecked.
Come back here, you fight like a paperback.
Look, it's Richard.
Cute little bugger.
Do we have to wake him up?
He's our only hope.
Well then, let's get to it. Time's a wasting, you landlubbers.
What am I? An alarm clock?
Well, you ain't no book of the month. Come on now, anchors away.
Huh? Fantasy adventure? What are you doing here?
Me too. I'm here too.
Furl your sails, you slobbering sea dog. The boy's not blind.
Richard, something's wrong at the library.
Sanctuary, sanctuary.
He means there's been a mutiny. Hardcovers mixed with paperbacks. I found books on needlepoint next to Captain Courageous.
Can't this wait until morning? It's cold and flu season.
No, this can't wait. We need your help. Now, are you coming?
Huh?
Something weird's going on in the library, and we need your help.
Wow, cool. What are they?
They're books. Aren't they classics?
Sadly, from the very beginning, the problems are seen tenfold. Before we get into that, the premise of the game is that Jackal has stolen the Pagemaster, or his book, or something. All of the books will get sick slowly because of this. Horror, adventure, and fantasy come wake up Richard to force him to help. It's a very simple story. So, what problems do we see from the intro? First up, everything is slow as hell. Like, honestly, it is painful how slow this game can be. Every screen takes a lifetime to load in. This becomes a problem in the actual game itself, because you don't necessarily know when the game actually wants you to move on with what you're doing, or whether you are waiting for Richard to pipe up with something to say. One of the bigger problems I had with this is when I walked onto a screen in horror, thought that Richard had moved in without needing to talk to us, before I clicked on a book just as the voice line for Richard kicked in. I was then met with a yes or no question with no context to what it was I was being asked, because, you know, why would they repeat the line? A knock-on of everything being so slow is that the dialogue then feels disjointed and unnatural. Whilst we all know these people were sat in a room recording on their own, it feels like it. Nothing sounds like people are actually just talking to each other. Instead, the effect makes it seem like they've just picked random sound effects that make sense for any given instance. All of this is very jarring. Now, this isn't a game-breaking negative that made me dislike the game. It gave it a bit of charm that I kind of got used to in the end. None of the voice actors from the film were in the game, as you can imagine, but everyone they have voicing the characters do a great job of sounding just like their famous counterpart. Some scenes or sections are done better than others, but for the starting cutscene, it felt rough. So then let's move on to the gameplay. Your cursor is nice and big. It is also reactionary. When you hover over anything, it'll change to what it is you can do with things. So if you can talk to it, it'll turn into a mouth, pick something up, turns into a hand. Look at things, Richard's glasses, which I think is a nice touch, seeing he does indeed wear glasses. Obviously, it isn't unique in any way, but it is well implemented. This game didn't need anything more complicated than that. Whilst it isn't a pixel hunting kind of game, the reactionary cursor is a nice touch to let you know what can and can't be interacted with on the screen. Often there isn't much to each screen. Things do tend to stand out a little if you can actually interact with it, but for some rooms like Horror's bedroom, it is a nice way of showing exactly what is needed to be interacted with just by throwing the cursor across the screen a few times. There is also this compass, which is where I think they tried to overcomplicate things, and it just didn't work. When you can't use any point of the compass, it'll be grayed out like this. If you can use it, as you can guess, it will color itself in. Go tends to mean going along with whatever the character just said. You can just move from screen to screen with your cursor though. Most screens have multiple options, so this only really works when you're actually talking to someone and they say do this, and then you press go. What? As in, this button what, makes whoever just spoke to you repeat themselves. I'd say this was handy, but no one says much anyway. Whilst I get people might want them to say something over again, I honestly feel none of the dialogue was worth listening twice to, other than potentially the Greeks at the end, because they were asking you actual questions. Then you have yes and no. These are your only options when talking to anyone, really. Yes is you agree, and no, you don't agree. It's very simple. Richard has all his text thought out. Much like most of the games I've talked about recently, he isn't a blank character. He's a character from a movie with a set personality. But also, the game isn't really about letting you be part of the story, funnily enough. Kind of like the film, it ruins this whole books are great by just not having you be part of this story. You do have right and wrong answers, though, with the yes and no's to people, but we'll get to them in the game. One thing that took me forever to figure out was that the middle dial in the compass is actually the button that takes you to the inventory. The game does have an inventory. It doesn't have many items, and when you've picked up the inventory items, they stay in your inventory forever. This also goes hand in hand with the score button. I guess being made in the early 90s, the game decided to have a scoring system much like old Sierra games did, and obviously arcade games back then in the day. You get points for interacting with books, scenery, and picking up objects, as well as using them correctly. You can also lose points by touching the wrong things, going to the wrong screens, and picking the wrong answers. Points show up in the top right corner as you progress, and they are obnoxiously huge for no apparent reason. It really is a pointless addition to the game. But with all that said, let's get back to the game. Richard here ends up in the library in time to see Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde abscond with the Pagemaster's book. Or I should say Mr. Hyde kind of absconds with it. Jekyll is obviously in on it because they're the same person, they're two halves of the same coin, but Hyde is the one that you're chasing after in the game. It is up to us to guide Richard through 3 levels based on the books that he befriended in the film: adventure, fantasy, and horror. This game is brutal when it comes to learning the game, though. I'm guessing everything you'd need to know is in the manual somewhere, but it isn't in the game. It throws you in the deep end, leaving it up to you not to drown on your own. Everything I just told you, I learned by just doing things. You press buttons and just hope for the best. Richard will pick up books, and then their pages on random screens. I did wonder if you could see what books you picked up, but it wasn't until I got to Horror's bedroom and had my first inventory item that I realized that the middle button on the compass is actually the inventory button. Again, I guess it would all be in the manual, so I won't hate it too much for that, but it was a bit annoying having to figure it all out on your own, especially the inventory thing. This is a problem with old games, though. They never thought about the day when people wouldn't have all the bobbins that they originally put out with the games. And when you are struggling to find a forgotten game, it can be hard to find even more forgotten media attached to it. So yeah, you can find the manual for the Pagemaster platformer game for the Mega Drive, but I have yet to find one for this game. That being said, this game is kind of a walking sim. Richard will make his way through these labyrinth-like levels. Most screens have absolutely nothing on them really, other than more paths for Richard to walk down, or a few things for him to interact with that will either give you points or take them away with no real reasoning behind either. So I went down the horror path first, which I found out was the wrong thing to do, even though it is the only area actually on disc 1, and was the first door to the left, so I feel a lot of people would probably take it. Maybe most people would go down the middle first, and I think adventure might be the first area you were meant to go down, but I went horror. Also, horror is just my favorite book. He's kinda cute. Look at this little guy.
I told you it was cold and flu season.
It's Hyde. You have to stop him before it's too late.
Whilst Richard is taking this trip down the library, as I said before, he'll pick up books. These books are missing pages, so those pages will also be left around the world. Each area gets 2 books each. For horror, it is obviously Jekyll and Hyde, because we're chasing after Hyde, but also Frankenstein. These pages will have excerpts from the books. Most don't seem to have any point to them, but some do point you in the direction you need to complete various tasks. All of them have a line or two that are actually voice acted. This, I guess, is to highlight the clue that the game is trying to give you.
I stole through the corridors, a stranger in my own house, and coming to my room saw for the first time the appearance of Edward Hyde. Must not at last be exterminated from the waters, and the last whale, like the last man, smoke his last pipe, and then himself evaporate in the final puff.
It had space for 50 oars, and was named the Argo, after its builder Argus, the son of Aristor.
Every area has multiple routes you can take. There is a specific best path, but as I said earlier, it's kind of trial and error. In Horrorland, you need to get to the mansion, but you don't really know where you are going. No one tells you to go to his mansion. You just kind of wander around, and then Richard's like, oh, I need to get to the mansion. Every area has a barrier. In Horrorland, it's this gate here that won't let you through till you solve a problem for them. This gate needs a key, obviously, so you'll continue on your way. If you continue to annoy it, then it will restart your progress. Yes, the game will restart you for doing things wrong. It doesn't matter if these levels are huge or not. fantasy did feel huge, but I think I was more fatigued of the game at that point. Either way, regardless of how many screens these areas have, they are all tediously slow to get through. Richard needs to walk through them, which takes a moment. You also then have the loading into the screens, loading out of the screens, loading voice lines, loading the game, figuring out what the heck you're trying to do with it. A simple 3 or 4 screen navigation of these mages takes much longer than it needed to take, which makes the trial and error of the game kind of a daunting task. Don't worry though, you can save the game whenever you want. Bad news for me is that my version of the game both refused to load my first save at all, then stopped even letting me save the game midway through horror. So yeah, the trial and error then became a nightmare, because who wants to do 30 minutes of walking around just for you to be reset at the beginning of the area and have to spend that 30 minutes going back to where you got the reset to figure out what you did wrong? I can't say this is a game problem though. It is now abandonware, and obviously it could just be the ROM side of this, but most of these 30 minutes are walking on blank screens, so just watching Richard try to figure out what to do with the inputs you put in. If I had the saves, I'd probably feel a little different. I do have to admit my opinion of the game is down because I had to make like a perfect path through the game. Any kind of reset just meant that I was going back so far, and at this point it wasn't my fault. Usually it's my fault because I don't save games, but I couldn't save the game, and it just made everything drag on longer and longer than it had to. Look, I keep complaining. Let's put the complaints to one side for a minute. Sure, the game plays weirdly, spends forever wasting your time with loading screens, and so far hasn't really done anything to respect your time, but I still think the game is worth talking about, so I need to talk about it. As I've said, each area is kind of a maze of corridors. There is always a right path to take, but you need to learn it first. Some of these paths will have puzzles to solve, whilst others will be just walking. Some paths lead to dead ends, and very often there will be a bad guy in that ending. So, in horror, it is death himself, which makes sense.
You know, it's not really very polite to point.
These ones don't actually reset you. You'll just walk back to the crossroad you were on. I think they just take points away from you. So 2 of the paths here in horror will have their own ways to solve them. I say solve them. This one with the quicksand, you'll have to look at the sign first, whilst this one you just have to not pick up the Hounds of the Baskerville. Whilst this is kind of silly, because at this point people are just picking everything up thinking it's important, I quite like the reference to hounds as well, because that is actually in the film. Richard does open the book, have the dogs attack, then throws it away just for the dogs to come out of the book and he has to run away from them. So that's a nice nod to the film if you've ever seen the film. In fact, for a positive, this game does have some really fun scenes. Richard doesn't get killed in the game like Graham or George do in their games, mainly I guess because it is a kid's game with a child character as the main character, but he does have restarting points, as I've said. It's kind of more like a Looney Tunes thing. He just kind of gets attacked and then he's fine. Other books that you can click on will pop up with random things, make noises, or restart you without much reasoning. I feel this again is like the edutainment games. It is aimed at younger kids, so it is rewarding their curiosity by giving them these scenes, which then boggles my mind why some would, without any warning, restart you or take points from you. It's a great idea, poorly implemented in a way that both rewards and then punishes players without ever having a real reason why it's doing either of them. So a kid clicking on everything because he thinks it's going to be fun is then going to get punished for clicking on things and maybe stop clicking on things because they got punished, and that's not really fair. Constantly making your way to the right means you'll end up in the redwoods, which is really clever because of redwood trees. These books kind of look like cliff sides, but I guess they were meant to be trees. Either way, you get this great little scene. With a very brave main character charging on very bravely after seeing it as the deadwoods instead, you'll come to another crossroads in the road. Yeah, that is what crossroads tend to be. They tend to be on roads. Going upwards will introduce you to these 2 vultures.
It was a T-bone, I tell you. Hello, what have we here?
Lovely night for a stroll, isn't it, my tasty little hors d'oeuvre?
I guess so. My mom would probably want me to wear a scarf, though.
You're in mortal danger. Would you care for some assistance?
This is where you get your first fail state with dialogue. You see, if you can't tell, these guys aren't good guys. I get that the setting we're in can't tell you that, but they will offer to help you. Agreeing to let them help you will unveil that one of them is actually Hyde. Oopsie.
That would be great!
Better yet, we could get the Pagemaster for you.
That would be great!
Better yet, we could get the Pagemaster for you.
Just saying no, and Hyde will actually tell you where to go. I don't really get why, but he'll just point you in the direction of the mansion. So off Richard trots as they continue to bicker.
Nice going, bird brain. And it was mutton.
It was beef, I tell you.
Hey.
You'll get to the mansion to find horror there. See, the books don't come with you, but they kind of do. Whilst they will leave you at the entrance of their section, they will show up on certain screens to give you hints and tips, whilst also pushing through the story of the books getting sick because of Hyde. It also shows off their personality well. Here with horror is him being a big baby and screaming all the time.
Don't pull the sanctuary! Sanctuary! Be careful, Master. It's scary inside.
Also, the books are down the bottom of the screen. Clicking on them will be the fast travel out of the land, which is something I'll need in a moment. When you complete any of the areas, the books themselves will turn to gold, which is a nice touch letting you know that you have indeed finished the area. So, 10 out of 10 work there. Getting into the mansion, you will be in yet another maze because that is just how the game will be. You get these drawers that not only have the Pagemaster stuffed into one of them, but also horror.
Please hurry, Master. I don't feel so good.
Oh, and horror is also roasting marshmallows in the fire.
It's him! I found him! Horror, what are you doing here? I thought you were outside.
I was cold. Marshmallows always make me feel good. Want one?
I've got work to do.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna have more things about horror in this video than the others because he just always was my favorite book. He's just kind of derpy and cute. Adventure gets some good moments, but honestly, fantasy doesn't even do much in her section other than tell us constantly she's getting sick, which I think she kind of did in the film as well. But she did have a good back and forth with Adventure, and I think there lies the problem, in that because the books don't have a back and forth, Adventure and Fantasy very much had this kind of will they, won't they date kind of thing. It was kind of cute, whereas Horror was just a cute kind of oddball that followed you around. So in the game, that shines through as well. He's just the oddball doing cute little things, and then Adventure and Fantasy don't really do much. There is also this really cool moment that isn't in any of the other areas. As you walk through this hallway of paintings, clicking on them gives you a little look at Hyde doing various things in the paintings, including this one in the graveyard, which is just the derpiest shit I've ever seen.
I'm just dying to meet you.
You'll also have to pick up your first real inventory item here when you navigate to Horror's room. For some reason, it's just Richard's room. Don't ask because they don't want you to ask and they won't answer it. There are a few things you can touch in here, not that many surprisingly, but you do have to pick up this lifesaver. Without this, you can't get past this giant Venus flytrap blocking the way, but it is also the first time you'll need to use the inventory, and with no instructions on how to get to the inventory, you'll be sat there wondering for a moment how to even get to it. Again, all the items just stay on the page forever, because if you do have to go back past this guy, which I will in a minute, or later on I guess, you will have to use the lifesaver again. This is where you'll meet Frankenstein's monster. Which makes sense, because this lab is so Frankenstein, it is unbelievable. It reminded me instantly of the lab in the FMV Frankenstein game with Tim Curry, because of course Tim Curry is in a game like that. And kind of made me want to play that instead of this game, because that game is really good. It is also confusing and obtuse, but it doesn't have the huge loading screens from what I remember.
He's alive. Alive! I have created life. There. That will make you feel better. A toast. In celebration. I have made a man.
The monster in this game, though, is great. He starts off being the normal scary monster you would expect him to be, before just becoming the most chill guy you can hope to meet.
Have you seen a crazed maniac running around? Glowing red eyes, bad haircut?
I told you, I was sleeping.
I have to find him. He's got my friend the Pagemaster.
You're lucky. You have friends. I have nothing. I am reviled. No one loves me.
Come on, you must have one.
I have no one! Sorry. Now, what kind of maniac you looking for? Psychopath or sociopath?
No, you don't understand. I have to find Hyde. He's kidnapped the Pagemaster.
Hyde promised to make me look handsome. All I got to do is drink this.
Our monster friend here is another restart point if you aren't careful, and the first one I actually walked into on my first playthrough that made me go, I might do this some other day, because man is it a long walk back if you fail here and don't have a save. When he starts to drink his potion, you need to stop him, so picking the correct text options is important before just chucking a bottle at him to stop. I believe both of these are reset points. If you don't use the right dialogue, he will then attack you, and if you don't throw the right bottle at him, he will then also attack you, so just be careful. He won't be mad, but he will ask for a bride because he's lonely. Or at least he whines about it, and then Richard just kind of agrees to help, because that's kind of how Richard is. He just kind of walks into things and does things, and then whines that he has to do things. This is where you'll find a page that will actually help you, because it tells you that you need to go to the graveyard to get pieces for the bride, meaning the monster will give you the key to the gate. But this is also where you'll want to leave and go elsewhere. You see, you can't complete horror in one go. Again, it is the only level on the first disc, but you'll only dig up a body with no head. So click on horror at the bottom, transport to the library, and head to adventure. Note here for anyone playing this without CDs, when it pops up saying insert next disc, you'll have to press Ctrl F4 or function Ctrl F4 depending on what your keyboard's like. This then fools the emulator into believing that you are actually changing the disc for it. You are welcome. It took me a while to figure that one out. Into adventure you go, and it starts kinda silly. Like, you could just walk past this fishing rod because it isn't really that important, but you can, for points, use it for this scene.
Look out for Jolly and Roger! He's in a really bad mood!
This game is seriously a mystery to me. They put so much into it with the cutscenes, but it felt like they had loads of funny scenes that they wanted to put in the game, animated them, and then never found a story or reason to have them in it, so just put them in anyway. It is weird, but this isn't a complaint either. I think it gives it some whimsy, which the film was full of, and the game kind of needed. It does slightly jar with the gameplay. It's such a slow game, so it's kind of just fun to have moments and find them, and then have a bit of a laugh at them. Our books for Adventureland obviously are Treasure Island, because it's the biggest one there is, and Moby Dick. Both were massive moments in the film as well, so it makes a lot of sense in that way. And as I said, Treasure Island, as we talked about in the Muppet Treasure Island game review, is just one of the biggest adventure books ever written. This whole area is kind of pirate-themed, as you can guess, with Treasure Island being one of the stories, whilst the other is sea-based. That being said, it does get a little weird in the middle section, but then again, I've never read Treasure Island and don't remember Moby Dick, so maybe it isn't. You can tell me in the comments if it's weird or not when we get to it. Our big block here is this Jamaican skull that wants a doubloon. It is pretty cool, I like it, so we're gonna go off and find a doubloon. So there isn't really a goal to this area like in horror. I know after you get to the mansion you have to go back to the graveyard, but there is a place that you want to go and get to, and even going to the graveyard is to get back to the monster with what he needs. Here you just kind of walk around. You'll get to this village which has its pier made out of books. You can click on them for funny little noises and even a nice little look at the pirates looking for something or someone in one of the stores. You'll get to this crossroads and you can go north to see a pirate and his parrot, but you really want to head to the left first to get on a boat. Why do you want to get on a boat? Why wouldn't you want to get on a boat? But why do you want to get on this boat? You want to get on this boat because there is no hint to this, but the head of the monster's bride is actually in the crow's nest.
Whoa, there's a face only a monster could love. Ew.
Spooky, hey? Now, funnily enough, you can also get a fox head in fantasy, so maybe you can even do the fantasy area first and complete the game that way, but I went with adventure as it was just the next door to go through. You can then head back to the pirate and his parrot, and you'll be talking to his parrot mainly.
Pieces of 8! Pieces of 8! Ahoy, matey! If it be adventure you seek, come and hear the words I speak. Terrible beasts and buccaneers have the book and the shears. Interested?
I love this bird. Look at how cute he is. I know they only remind me of Iago from Aladdin because they are both parrots, but he does have that attitude on him. He'll send you on your way to find the great white whale and also tell you to make sure to pick shears. In doing so, he sends us to the pyramids? So yeah, I don't know why the pyramids are here, but Richard will just walk up to a pyramid and ring the bell, because that is how pyramids work in this world. A mummy will then answer you and give you directions to the white whale. Again, this game is just a walking sim, so you'll find yourself walking around maze-like screens trying to figure out where to go and what to do. You'll end up on screens like this that have death scenes to them.
Jaywalking is definitely not good.
I get that it is like Looney Tunes violence and Richard is always okay at the end because he's a cartoon in this world, but these are some brutal scenes for the child main character to go through. I guess still not as terrifying as what Andy had to go through in Heart of Darkness. Honestly, there isn't that much to this game, and other than me walking you through screen by screen, the game review part of this video is about to speed up, and it isn't because there isn't fun moments, but most of the game is walking around empty screens, especially it feels in fantasy. So the next big moment for Richard is meeting a monkey, then meeting a genie.
A genie! I get 3 wishes! I get 3 wishes! I get...
Hold it! You know how many genies we've had to lay off? You get only 1 wish. Now what'll it be? The usual selfish whims, fame, fortune, immortality.
Selfish? I just want to get out of here.
So be it.
We'll be sent to the beach in a rowboat, and Adventure will see us off the shore. Again, it is sad that Adventure can't come with us, especially as this section actually ended up being pretty epic, but was also just kind of static pictures as well. Yeah, we get to be part of Moby Dick. Look at this section. Look at how cool it looks. I was super impressed by all this. There was nothing this cool in the horror section. This is straight out of the film as well. This happens in the film, kind of. Richard will take the side of the whale, but the whale will still eat Ahab in this gory scene that the game isn't afraid to show off, before Richard just picks up a doubloon from the whale and heads off back to the skull. Like, I love this kid so much. It was kind of a thing in the film too, where he'd do something, sometimes have a moment where he'd be like, I did this thing, but mainly just walking away afterwards. It all built up to a giant blow-off at the end of the film where he gets really angry because he just wants to leave and he's done all these things to get to where he was meant to go, looking inside himself and figuring out that he had learned a lot of lessons from the stories he'd walked through. Here it is a little more jarring as it is a game with very little story being told, but to be fair on it, he still has a bit of a blow up at the end, so just wait for that, because Richard is kind of funny. So this is one of my favorite screens. When you get back to the skull and you give him the doubloon, you come into here. There isn't anything special about it, and honestly this game is full of well-designed areas with really fun things to look at. The problem is they are drowned out with just long corridors for Richard to march down with little to interact with. I feel horror did these corridors best and fantasy did them worst, but you'd stop in a room like this and I love it. This bar is called Chum. Its tagline is, "We serve fish," so the whole bar is filled with fish being served. It is Ahab's missing leg above the door as well, which is just a great little nod to Moby Dick, but also shows this is some kind of safe space for the fish, away from those that want to hurt them. But my favorite gag, the best thing ever, is that we're sat at this table with Adventure, and he's so short you can only see the top of his book. This made me laugh out loud. Honestly, this was the kind of humor the film did so well, and it was one of the first times in my playthrough I saw it in the game. I was so happy to see it. After picking up the map to the treasure on the wall in the bar, the pirates will finally arrive. You'll get a really funny scene of Adventure trying to fight back that is too long, especially with the load screens, and doesn't look that great. But if you watch the film, you'll appreciate it because he kind of does things like this in the film quite often and always fails. But in the end, we get Jim Hawkins out of here. Or in other words, kidnapped, because we have the map, just in case that made no sense to you. Jim Hawkins was kidnapped because of the map. At least in Muppet Treasure Island. Again, I've never seen Treasure Island, I've never read it. I don't know anything about Jim Hawkins in that. But in Muppet Treasure Island, he gets kidnapped by Tim Curry. I'd be kidnapped by Tim Curry, I wouldn't mind that.
Don't help the one-legged man!
Grab him, boys!
This is more a dialogue thing where you have to basically just go along with the pirates. Then you all head off to dig up the treasure together, and much like Tim Curry and Muppet Treasure Island, it isn't like they're gonna just rob you blind, they let you have an item. Again, I'm a terrible reviewer, but also I couldn't save the game and didn't know how far back I'd have to go if I picked the wrong thing, so I didn't see what happens if you click on anything else, and instead just took the shears like the parrot told me. This was meant to be a short game I played to fill a gap between now and whenever I can finish Danganronpa. I didn't need to prolong my pain of watching Richard walk around if I didn't have to. Go find a better YouTuber who will fail for your pleasure. Please don't. I like this video. Please watch it. With that done, congrats, you have finished Adventure. It's by far the simplest one to complete, which I guess is why it is the middle of the screen. Maybe I'm just a weirdo that goes from left to right all the time, but to me, it feels more natural to start from the left and go over. Plus, it is on the second disc as well, so naturally I felt I picked correctly with horror, but I hadn't. You need to go to Adventure first, really. Either way, you now have what you need for horror, so you can head back, enter the graveyard, and get this scene.
I can't believe I'm doing this. Sheesh! Stop sneaking up on me.
I'm sorry.
You're supposed to be in bed.
This is my next stop if you don't find Hyde. I just thought I'd save some time. Besides, I know all the best tunes.
Okay then, let's get to it.
Yeah, this game has grave digging. You personally don't do it, and body parts aren't sent flying or anything. You click on some graves to get random lines thrown at you, which are fun, so have some of them.
Eunice Thumbrister. From a wagon she hitched a ride, hit a bump, and then she died. Florence Mistletoe loved the holidays.
He's done a catching cod and gone to meet his God.
Gertrude Torstenson left behind a great body of work.
Bird ya Handley. Picked one too many pockets.
Then, when you get to the final screen, you'll have all the parts you need, and will have to make your way back to the mansion. Yes, they make you walk all the way back. It is a long trek, so just be careful not to accidentally restart yourself on something. When we place a body up for the monster, you'll realize you don't have a head, so it's a good thing that you picked one up in Adventureland, right? There was no rhyme or reason why it was in the crow's nest either, so it was a good thing I just went there. You'll have to read another page which will tell you about the electricity that was used to bring the monster back to life, and after Richard flips the switch, finally the monster can have some love, because that is just how things work in this world. A child finds you a bride and they're just happy about it. It makes sense, of course it does. Richard will then be given the letter E, a strange item to have, and again, congrats, you have now finished horror as well, leaving only fantasy to deal with.
Thank you, Master. You saved me.
Now, fantasy was my least favourite area, but it's still a fun one to play. It felt like there were more screens to navigate, and they were mainly just long green fields with little to nothing else on them. I think the look was based more on nursery rhymes and fairy tales, so it had this very open feel to it. But I quite liked the library slowly fading away in horror, with the actual horror land still being a maze of shelves up until you basically leave the first area. And whilst it was still kind of uninspiring, the seaside feel to adventure makes sense with the books it was referencing. Oh, here in Fantasyland, by the way, we have Jason and the Argonauts and Jack and the Beanstalk. Now, I'm not against Jack and the Beanstalk, it's a great story, but when you think of the other 5 books we got, and then you throw Jack and the Beanstalk into the mix, it feels like the odd one out for a good reason. Then again, it goes back to being just a very important part of the film too. It is a book that Richard uses to grow the Beanstalk to get away from trouble. That will be important later in this area for not really the same reasons, but it is a beanstalk. Of course it'd be helpful. As I said, our other book is Jason and the Argonauts, so you can kind of see where this is going. Maybe you can't. You should. Richard's gate for this area will be the Sphinx. Just if you have already done everything else, you'll be able to give her the letter E, as the answer to her riddle is just E. It makes the E a little less silly, I guess, but it's still silly. Like, come on, who just gives someone a letter E? I feel like they could have picked just about any other riddle in the world and given you an item for it that didn't seem very out of place like this. Either way, she's blocking the way to a dragon. Again, Richard does fight a dragon in the film, so this makes sense. This dragon, though, is angry because Jason stole the golden fleece from him, and he wants it back. If we can return it, we'll get Excalibur. Now, we saw Excalibur stolen from the library, kind of. You have to either know you can turn around in the library to get this scene.
Huh?
Richard, help me.
Pagemaster, where are you? How am I supposed to...
Find Hyde, and you'll find me. And remember, when in doubt, look to the books.
Wait, Pagemaster!
I think I AFK'd to write some notes and it suddenly played, but I can't be sure that I didn't just click on something to send me there anyway. Either way, it wasn't part of the main intro, and I nearly went the whole game without seeing it. I don't think I saw the character in Adventure that blocks you off from time to time. I said in horror it was death, and here in fantasy it is actually the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, which was a missed opportunity to have more Alice in Wonderland in this area. I love that book. It is one of my favourite franchises. So whilst I like that it was included, you could have had some of these corridors covered in roses being painted red or something, right? There feels like there were more characters in this area as well, but they were kind of just pointless. You'll find a frog that will turn into a version of you. He's next to this fox that is the other head you could apparently use for the monster. Then there is a satyr who you can't sit around with else he'll put you to sleep or something. I don't know, I just ignored him and went on my way. You also later on meet Bo Peep, and I can't really remember if she was important, but you talk to her and agree to find a sheep, and then you have to tell her not to let someone else find a sheep, but I don't think that comes back, because when you do find the ram and take it, you never go back to Bo Peep. That being said, there are 2 great moments and 2 great characters. First is this bridge, with the troll under the bridge. It doesn't feel fantasy at all. This feels like it comes out of some old British sketch show. It is so silly, but I love it. Look at this guy poking his face out. He's just watching us from under the bridge. Look at him. So you'll need to answer a bunch of his questions using the yes or no buttons. Then when he repeats them, you have to pick the same answers again. He'll then let you go. That being said, if you went to this screen first, you can get a cookie from the gingerbread man and give it to the troll, and then he'll let you over the bridge anyway. The questions are really silly, but I really enjoyed it. Listen to this guy, he's hilarious.
What is your quest?
I seek the Pagemaster.
A very noble quest. Let's see. Do you like spinach?
Spinach? What's so important about spinach?
It's very high in iron. Now, yes or no? Bee stings. You like getting a bee sting?
Bee stings? Are you kidding me? No way! I'm allergic to bee stings.
I love them.
I love the question about bees because it feels like a nod to his character in My Girl that dies to the bee stings, but it also, I think, was just one of those things that Richard mentions in the film. I guess as a kid, one of the big horrors you had was if you get stung by bees a lot, you'll die. I don't know if that came from things like My Girl, but I remember much like quicksand, which again is in this game, it was something all 90s kids were terrified of. Dying to bee stings, sinking in quicksand, that kind of stuff. I still want it to be a nod to My Girl, which come out in 1991. You can't change my mind on that regardless. But it was just something especially nerdy characters were just always terrified of. Nearer the end, you also have this Buddha statue that, when you interact with it, turns into this guy. He rambles on, but basically he has a bean on his hat he wants you to take. But I just think it was a really silly bit that didn't make sense with the game or the film, but stood out because so much of the game had been kind of bland to this point. Using the beanstalk will send you to Olympus, which is by far the strongest area of the game by miles. You'll end up with Pan the God, a hippocampus, and a centaur. They will ask you random questions about Greek mythology, and you have to talk to the two who didn't ask the question and agree with the correct answer. I think this was a really unique puzzle for the game. They had done the whole dialogue yes and no things before, but they never actually asked questions to get you thinking. I loved it as someone who loves Greek mythology, and funnily enough, the very next video out on this channel also has a quiz like this at the end of it. It is just really fun, honestly, after a lot of walking around and doing not much. When you have answered their questions, you can steal from the gods. Mainly you need the ram as well as the lightning bolt from Zeus. You'll be told to only use the lightning bolt for good, and with that you'll head back to the dragon. Just like all dragons, it isn't happy. It wasn't the ram, you see, that it wanted the golden fleece. So you use the shears you got from Adventure to cut off the fleece and give it to the dragon, who in return does not give you Excalibur. So yeah, you send the lightning bolt at the dragon to get Excalibur. Again, a nice nod in a way to the first film, but also just another fun little moment.
Whoa, dragon vapor. Excalibur!
This is the end of the game, though. All 3 books are now sick. The library is feeling the corruption of Hyde having the Pagemaster's book, so you head back to Olympus where Hyde has made himself God to confront him. The cut to Olympus was terribly done as well, as you can see. At this point, the game wanted to be over as much as we wanted it to be over. You can't be in any other part of the game to end the game either. The dragon confrontation has to be done last, as both your way into the dragon, as well as the way to get the fleece, are rewards for the end of the other 2 areas, the E and the shears. At least it didn't make us walk. There isn't much to talk about in the final confrontation. Hyde will tell you his plans and start shooting bolts at you. You'll use Excalibur to stop the bolts, he'll drop the book, and then Richard uses the power of being an upset child to end the game.
Insolent child! You'll pay for that!
It's over, Hyde! Hand over the book!
Now give me the sword, or I'll destroy us all!
No, you listen to me. Because of you, I've been made a slave by pirates, eaten by a fire-breathing dragon, tossed, squashed, shocked, shredded, and changed into all kinds of silly animals. Well, enough's enough. You're one book that's overdue to be shelved.
You looked Moby Dick in the eye, boy. Ah, you had fired at stuff, me lad. And don't let no one tell you different.
You prevailed over
Fantasy, you're okay.
Thanks to you. Baby, you're the greatest.
Master, you saved us.
That you did, matey. You're a hero in my book.
He's a hero in any book.
The Pagemaster!
You have done well, my boy. You saved us all. I trust you enjoyed the adventure.
Oh, yes, sir. It was fantastic. I want to do it all again.
And you shall. But first, what shall I do with this?
Book him.
Right you are. Now, let's find you a new adventure.
Cool.
Remember, look to the books.
Congrats, that's another game done and dusted, so how do we feel about it today? I always found it wild that people didn't like the film. It felt like the perfect kids film, honestly, but I was also a bookworm and loved fantasy. It had an all-star cast, one of the most prominent child actors of the time, and to this day it boggles my mind how many people just haven't seen it. There was so much the game could have done, yet it just didn't do it. They tried to make something of their own, and I give them credit for that. It was a beautiful game that tried so hard to bring the whimsy and magic of the films to life and the screens you did get to explore. Whilst most were dreary pathways to other places, when you had to stop and look, the screens were really well detailed, and Richard was perfect to what he was in the game as well as the books themselves. Underneath all the blow, it really paid homage to the film well. It tried its best to keep the spirit of it whilst telling its own unique story, which honestly is wild. You have this film coming out with a great plot, yet you make a game a sequel? That being said, it really didn't actually have any plot of its own. I feel story got left aside for cool ideas, or maybe story got left aside because they weren't really sure what they were making at all. You have Hyde stealing the Pagemaster. It makes sense to a point because Hyde was one of the big bads of the movie, so you already have the sprites to work with him. Plus, Jackal and Hyde just a cool concept for bad guys. You never really see Jackal again, it's only really Hyde at that point running around. But it's fun, it's good, they're a good bad guy. They tell you of the books getting sick, but because they aren't always with you, it's just small cutscenes here and there randomly sprinkled around with a lot of nothing. Richard does interact with the world and characters in it, but he also doesn't. They are mechanically there to tell you what to do the few times the game wants to tell you what to do, or else they are completely pointless to the plot at all, and just there to be restart points if you don't pick what the game wanted you to pick. Richard himself interacts with them naturally, and they keep the belligerent, annoyed persona of Richard from the films going perfectly, but nothing ever feels like it matters. My biggest complaint is it felt like an arcade game thrown into a point and click that just didn't make sense. It was like they played through Dragon's Lair, saw all the cool death scenarios, and took that model, then put a point and click into it. It just didn't work. Not to say point-based gaming or even deaths in the genre can't work, because whilst I say it looks like Dragon's Lair, very obviously the real comparison should be King's Quest and the Sierra games. Those games are notorious for killing a player for no reason. They give you points based on what you do, including losing them for doing things wrong. They have soft locks for things that happen hours and hours beforehand. Trial and error in point-and-click games is nothing new, and going into the early 90s, kids and adults alike would know save your game as often as possible in these games, because you'll need those saves. And also make sure to make those saves on different save states, because you'll have to go back a long way probably at some point. It isn't the game's fault that in 2026 it is hard to get hold of, and when you do get hold of it, then the game sometimes doesn't save, so I won't hold that against it. But it never felt fair either. I talked a lot about how Heart of Darkness was a brutal game that had you redo sections over and over till you learnt them, but it also felt fair. That game was basically non-verbal. It was a platformer that made you look at the screen and use the abilities you have on hand to overcome whatever you were doing in the moment. Pagemaster tried to have a story, but it also didn't give you enough parts of the story to let you know what it is you were doing. Yes, you should be saving, but you get stuck in these moments with very little options of what you can and can't do, and suddenly you are thrown back to the beginning of an area to do it all over again. That being said, maybe I'm more annoyed by this because of my personal experience with the saves not working, but also with how long the loading into screens took. As I said, it wasn't just waiting for Richard to slowly move or even make his mind up to move, but you'd get to his screens and have to wait to make sure Richard wasn't going to suddenly start talking again, and you were going to miss dialogue by clicking on things, and sometimes that felt like a lifetime. It was a slog to get through, it was slow and unfun, which is sad to say because there was so much potential to it. I think that is why I'm disappointed. The game had so much potential. Even if the film flopped, the idea of using books to build a world and explore is a fantastic idea. They had all the right ingredients, and they worked hard to make sure the voice cast, which wasn't the original, sounded exactly as they should. They had the personalities and actions correct. They seem to have been super limited on what they could achieve, and instead of scaling back and making a project that ran well, looked great, and had a wonderful plot, filled the game with really cool ideas connected by endless walking animations for Richard that weren't needed. Now, don't get me wrong, they were great, but I'd rather we just went screen from screen fluidly to move around than have to wait for Richard to make his way across them. If we could take the movement out and get more fluid gameplay, whilst it would have been sad because they did do a lot of work on the animations and stuff, everything was in place to have a great point-and-click game, but I think they didn't have someone who really knew what kind of game they actually wanted. Also, this UI was crap. You don't really need to have the compass itself, so why have it? Whilst the quiz in Olympus was fun, Pink Panther has already shown that you can do things like this without needing to add big bulky UIs to the page that don't add anything. It shouldn't be difficult to enter your inventory. That should be one of the easiest things in the game to do. Also, this blows my mind because they took their time to voice line so many pages out of these books that there is really no reason for most of them. Don't get me wrong, I love listening to them, but some pages have like a line voice acted, and it didn't really come up in the game at all as something important.
Courage was one of the great staple outfits of the ship, like her beef and her bread, and not to be foolishly wasted.
Marveled at the fleece, which glittered like the lightning of Zeus.
I will have no man in my boat, said Starbuck, who is not afraid of a whale. By this he seemed to mean not only that the most reliable and useful courage was that which arises from the fair estimation of peril, but that an utterly fearless man is far more dangerous than a coward.
Again, they had really good ideas, but they had too many, then mashed them all together, hoping that a good game would just appear, but they failed to put any of the things together that make a good game. Now, I'm also going to say something a bit controversial here. The game feels cheaply made. I know, I'm being a bit mean, but it does. From the loading screens taking a lifetime to move, to them not really having the books accompanying you, it just feels like the game didn't really have a big budget, so did the best they can. Which, to give them props, I think they really tried with the limitations. I feel a lot of the work went into actually making the game look great, which was wonderful, but if you took away half of these screens that were just unneeded, then the budget and the time could go on to other things that make the game fun. Of course, if I find out they had a lot of money and still did this, I'd be disappointed, but it just feels like they were very limited, and whilst I personally would have loved to have the books following us around, giving themselves less to animate was a smart move, because Richard does move, as I said, from screen to screen. Having 3 books, or even just 1 per area, would add so much more work. Even things like horror being in Richard's bedroom, it doesn't make any sense at all that horror's room looks like this, and they kind of hand-wave it away with, well, duh, it's magic. But you have to give them credit, it was a decent reuse of a screen, so they didn't have to make another screen filled with loads of stuff for this room. All that being said, though, I think it was a great attempt at actually bringing people into this world. It used the source material really well. Again, when the good ideas were right in front of you, they were amazing to see come to life. The weird moments in fantasy with the troll and the old man, Frankenstein's monster in horror, the bar with adventure in Adventure World. In fact, all the moments that weren't just ripped from the film were the best moments in the game. Their own characters with their own personalities, the fun little puzzles they have with them, like the grave digging or the quiz. When they moved away from the source material, they seemed to have really good ideas, but then it was bogged down in trying to get to them, or indeed trying to get back to them if you had to restart whole areas time and time again. It was tiresome. If you can get this game working in 2026 with saves or save states, I think it is a fun little game to play. Unlike me, you'll want to play it in a few different sittings, unless you can deal with the long waiting times for Richard to do anything. Maybe I was just having a bad day. The heat death of the UK this summer has been a thing. If I had played this under a blanket in December, maybe I'd feel very differently about it. I love that the game kept the characters feeling the same, and I think my biggest negative is we don't get to see enough of them all together. I get it, and I don't hold it against them, but every time Richard is with one of the books, the scene is just great. For me, if they had made the game more cinematic, gotten rid of all the walking around, and stuck to the areas with good characters, scares, or silly moments, gave Richard a group to play off of, focused on the story, and just took away their point system, this game could have been great. As it is, it's fine. For an afternoon of nostalgia or just out of curiosity, it'll be a good game to play. Much like the film, it doesn't deserve to be forgotten, but it is also a sad game to play because there's just so much potential and obvious love put into the game, and it just isn't that fun. Like, no one is putting this much detail into backgrounds, voice acting, or making so many clickable moments if they hate the game they are working on. I just think it lost direction somewhere and didn't have the best person in charge of storytelling. They needed someone to direct the story and make sure all the threads worked well together. You don't even have to make the game linear. You can do the 3 worlds and have you popping back and forth between them. But you do have to have a thread to carry it all together, story-wise. I didn't find it fun to sit through in one go, but I did like the charm of the game. I loved the joy it found in retelling old stories. I really thought the characters had a lot of potential for fun moments. I can't say I recommend the game, but I also can't say I don't. If you can find it and have an afternoon free, then do it, especially if you grew up with the film. If this is the only time you ever hear of the game or the film, then I hope you at least enjoyed my journey through it. Maybe go watch the film over the game, though. The film is great. The game is The platform is fun, though. If you can find the platform of the Mega Drive, play that one. That was fun. That is all I have time for today, though. Thank you, as always, for joining me. I've really enjoyed making these videos this year, and I hope you can see me slowly improving as time goes on. If you'd like to continue to support me, then please check out all the links in my description that will lead you to my socials, my Twitch, and my Patreon. Everything helps make these videos, so please feel free to hang out with me in any way you can. Till next time, though, thanks as always for watching, and bye-bye.